From the PSIA-AASI satellite studios in Corvallis, Oregon, I'm George Thomas. You're listening to First Chair, and oh my gosh, what a group we have for you tonight. We're wrapping up the Inspirational Instruction series that we started with Josh Pighetti. Josh, great to have you back. And tonight we're joined by two people that were very instrumental in this. And Josh, I'd love for you to explain the involvement of team members Matt, Larson, and Zoe Mavis.
Absolutely. Thanks again, George, for putting this on, and Matt and Zoe, thanks for being a part of this entire journey as we get to learn about inspirational instruction and bring it to the membership. For those of you listening, Matt and Zoe were among the national team that I got to explore the understandings of inspirational instruction and figure out what the best instructors in the country do to inspire their students to want to continue skiing and riding, to want to continue to learn, and want to continue to learn with that instructor. So what we get to do this evening with these two is talk about each of the 5 elements, being technical expertise, instructional communications, masterful teaching, personal professional character, and student-centered approach. If you have a chance, these two have already talked about giving feedback and authenticity in the keynote from National Academy. That was 2024. So that was a really good time. I do recommend everyone checking that out. But for tonight, we're going to go over each of the 5 altogether.
And before we get into that, Matt, what was it like for you to have Josh reach out and say, hey, I'm working on a PhD in snow sports instruction. I want you to help me out with this.
Well, it's like when you've been flattered because you were approached and picked out for some skills that maybe you weren't exactly advertising, but somebody sees in you as great. And it's a little uncomfortable, but also very exciting and honored. I'm honored to have been a part of it, and that Josh saw interest, and that I would be helpful at him researching the topics that he was focused on.
And Zoe, when Josh reached out to you, did you just say, dude, just teach like a girl?
Oh man, well, I mean, definitely humbled for sure, and I'm not the most academic human, so to be able to have a part and to share some passion in a space that I am confident in was really cool. And Josh obviously is awesome and easy to work with, and it's exciting to hear all that he's doing.
Well, Josh, let's dig into the 5 elements. And again, I would really like this to be a guided discussion with you all. But Josh, if you'd start with that, and then let's get input from Zoe and Matt as we get into each of these topics.
Perfect. Yeah, I figured we'd start with what I think may be the easiest, is your technical expertise. Being on the national team as a snowboarder, as a skier, you clearly have the knowledge and skill that it takes to be the best. But one of the things that inspirational instructors do is they take that knowledge and skill and they mold their abilities, their knowledge, to meet what the student wants and needs, and also gives them a little bit of a tease of what that student can do in the future. Either of you, can you talk about how you begin to assess what a student may want to see, and then how you adjust your skiing or riding to inspire them?
I'll kick off that it feels like a delicate balance, and it's a continuous reassessment. It isn't just an initial part, right? And I think that's what you're asking about, is where does it all begin? And it's hard for me to separate that from how it continues, I guess, as I hear that question. But yeah, at first, I think a great place to start is just some conversation and creating some rapport somehow, just to relate to them and have a moment to just go ride and observe. And that can even start before you've, say, shaken hands with somebody, because you might see them standing near the ski rack, and you might pick up some conversation, and then later on you realize, oh, that's going to be my student, but you retained some pieces of information that you can already reflect on and then start to go some different directions with that.
And so, I mean, expertise really starts as they're walking out and you see them for the first time, I would think, because you see someone fumbling around with skis. Maybe one's pointed one way, one's pointed the other. They're having trouble holding them. They're having difficulty walking in their boots. Yet you're able to walk up and help them and really help them come into the lesson in an organized manner where they're comfortable and you're already building trust. So isn't that a point where you're also building some technical expertise?
Yeah, I mean, Josh, I love that you started with this because I do remember when we did that keynote at National Academy. I think there was a question or something, maybe tease people to go back and listen to it, that somebody was asking about some key pieces, and something I truly believe that if we want to be inspirational and if we want to be able to not only show an image that our clients are inspired by or whoever we're coaching, as well as, like you said, George, be able to make that connection, we have to have some understanding about what we're speaking about the sport, right? And so for us to do our best, a baseline thing that we need is that technical understanding, and that's why it's a common thread in a lot of our certifications, and that's why it's a lot of times the focus around trainings is because yes, we need all these elements to be able to connect, to be able to build trust, all those stuff, and I know we'll get to that. But it's a sport. We're coaching a sport, and to be inspirational in it, you have to understand it. You have to be able to do it. And when people want to be truly inspired by you and they come to you to learn, understanding it, being able to do it, whether that's, now I'm not like Matt who can go throw down in the park really hard, right? Like some people are really inspired by that, while some people are inspired by more like a high level of technicality, maybe skiing some bumps quickly, right? Whatever the piece is. But once again, like Matt said, you start gathering information from your clients from the get-go to figure out, all right, like which side of my expertise do these people need to see? And if I've done my due diligence and build up my knowledge and understanding and my ability, then I'm able to meet them where they're at.
George, I think you brought up an interesting point about describing what the person looks like as they're walking up to you, because there is a lot of little detail you can pull out of that just by how someone's walking. You can understand how they move, and those observations are going to translate into how they can steer and control their equipment when you get on snow. So yeah, there's a lot of information out there available to us all the time, and having gone through a lot of reps of making those observations helps draw connections to how when someone's, say, walking up to you, how that translates to how they may perform on snow.
And it's interesting, as George, you and Matt, you both talk about someone walking up. And then we think about our teaching learning cycle. We have our introduction and assessment right up front. But the way you two are talking about it, it actually puts assessment first. Like we start to assess before we actually have our introduction. And Matt, to your point, we continually assess. And I think that's something really important as we take these steps is we're starting to learn about our students before our student even knows anything about us. And then we continue to build upon that. And Zoe, you said something about technical understanding and having our technical skill, being able to, be a sponge during the season, in the off season. And that actually leads us into our second element of inspirational instruction, being instructional communication. You two have the knowledge. The best instructors have the knowledge, you have the skill, but how do you make sure that you speak in such a way that your student retains it and wants to learn more?
I like that you're bringing words up, and I would love to hear from Matt and Zoe on this, because it's so important that we find out specifics. And when someone says, I want to get better, or I want to be good, or I don't like those words, because what is good? And I want to find out, what does good mean to you, Matt? What do you mean by good? obviously you want to be better than where you are, but what can you tell me about where you are that makes what you're doing good? Or Zoe, better? You're watching somebody the first time and you're like, wow, they're in this level lesson. This person's doing great, but they're not happy with where they are. What do you mean by better? Or I don't feel good. What does that mean?
Yeah, they're so vague.
Really way. I think we can often blow off that initial interview. Where are you from? What do you do? You can really find out a lot about a person by finding out what they mean by the word good.
I think that's interesting because it comes into the fact that it's a learning partnership, right? And so, Josh, I really appreciate, right, you're talking about like technical communication, right? We need to be able to communicate the sport to people. And George, like you're saying, we need to be able to understand where our clients are, how to meet them, where their understanding is, where their motivations are. And so this is where like that gap starts getting bridged between technical knowledge and our ability to like build a relationship, create some trust, be able to communicate, right? And so this is where I personally think a lot of pros have the more challenging place, right? Like you can have somebody who maybe does phenomenal and has great repertoire with their clients, but potentially is maybe a little more lacking in their technical side of things, right? Like they lean heavily on the relationship. Or you have people who are very technical, right? The folks where you go and listen to them and you're like, man, am I smart enough to be here? Like, do I know all these words? Right. And so the challenge there is yes, and right. We want to have all of this deeper knowledge and understanding of the sport and maybe even this vernacular, but then we have to be able to modulate it to meet somebody where they're at. Now, that could be a beginner who doesn't know any of the, verbiage or anything like that, and you need to be very basic and simple and clear. But it could also mean, one of us coaching a fellow pro and being able to share a really complex idea in a more simple way so they can start to understand it. And I think the biggest part about that communication isn't actually the words that you say. I think it's making sure you're able to read the signs of understanding and being able to gather information from those that you're coaching. Just like George was saying, like if you aren't 100% sure that what you're sharing is being understood, then you're not holding up your end of the partnership, right?
Absolutely. And as I got to learn about this from all of you, instructional communications, it comes down to a language and a shared language between the instructor, the pro, and the student. So even as we think about when we ask our skier or rider, hey, what is good to you? Then all of a sudden we start to tune into what words are they using to describe their own performance or their desired performance. And the inspirational instructor is able to take their knowledge and translate it or distill it into language that the student already knows. And then from that baseline, you're able to enhance their vocabulary, their understanding of the sport. That's really one of the reasons why they come to us. So I think both of you have hit such great points in terms of instructional communications. Understanding how the student already talks about the sport, if they talk about it at all, and then being able to take what we know, teach it to them, and maybe tease in the language that we use so that it's consistent. Maybe they don't take a lesson with Zoe every single time they go to a different resort. Whatever language Zoe and her student have created together, that student can go to another resort, say those words, and another instructor understands it. All of a sudden, we've truly created this language of snow sports instruction nationally. So that's something fun that I really enjoyed learning from inspirational instructors.
Matt, you got anything to add?
Yeah, as I'm listening, I'm thinking of a couple of points that actually the wheels were spinning and falling off the car. There were so many things whizzing through. So hopefully I can describe a couple of items. But one on just building the common language between people and approaching your conversations with someone you know not as well, you don't know as well. with an approach of listening to understand, to allow for as much of that language from them to come to you, so you give yourself the biggest opportunity to pick up on how you can speak in return to them and it be meaningful to them. Frosting on this cake is to also approach the conversations that you're likely not going to understand, or you're going to interpret your words differently than this person. And that with that mindset, it will keep you in a place of being at least willing to consider that and ask more questions to hopefully hit the mark that you do find that common language and common understanding when whatever words, whatever vocabulary comes out as the things to use to relate to each other, that you are on the same page in the book.
Yeah, certainly. And you bring up the idea of checking for understanding, and whether it's looking at it as meaning, as interpretation, our intent versus the actual impact. Yeah, that's where checking for understanding really allows us to determine if communication, which is two-way, is actually happening in the way that we mean it to happen. I feel like we could continue on and on and on with how we communicate, because it is something that is so important. And it's also it's that fine line that we dance. We want to communicate, but one of the things that we sometimes get caught up in is communicating too much. So with that, I want to take this next step towards masterful teaching. And with masterful teaching, what inspirational instructors have shown in the research is that inspirational instructors, they lean into their creativity, but they also work on building their creativity, and they use that to build scenarios for experimentation, exploration, and play, which, yes, is one of our fundamentals. And then there's constant collaboration with students in some of the decisions that are made in the progression, in the learning experience. So I'm going to leave it at that. I welcome you to go wherever you want with masterful teaching.
Creativity? Why? I mean, if it worked for one person, it'll work for everybody, right, Zoe?
Certainly not.
Okay, so some of the things I had just listed down from my wheels spinning off the car relate so well to this, that, Josh, you opened up with the over communicating, or maybe using too many words. And I think that's something that falls into the masterful teaching component, is really being able to cut down the fluff of the things you're saying, so your message can shine when you speak to somebody else. As I was saying that, I was trying to find fewer words to deliver that message. And it's funny. I think that's the pulling back the curtains element here to also share is that reflection that's going on in the brain, that voice that's saying, okay, say the same thing with less words before you say it. Just that dialogue is happening is a great tactic to have. And then, allow yourself some pause to have that dialogue, then deliver, will make it'll just really help elevate that learning experience and that communication for your students.
Yeah, that dialogue, right, that's so interesting, because I hear this whole thing, masterful teaching, and I completely agree. And we talk about creativity, and then we turn around when we teach our beginner pros a beginner progression, right? Which is not creative, it's copy and apply, right? So I think there's some necessity for all things, right? Like, I think some point there has to be some sort of entry point that might be something you've done before, might be something consistent, right? Like, I'll be 100% honest, I start a lot of things focused on the outside ski, or some sort of something having to do to align with the outside ski, because it's an easy starting point in a lot of places, right? I'm not saying I always do that, but oftentimes I call it an entry point into a coaching segment, right? So I think what happens is people talk about like tools in the toolbox or all this sort of stuff or progressions, right? And I think it's totally fine to have some things that can be helpful, some things that can work for a lot of people. However, I think when we get up to that level of masterful teaching and be able to truly individualize the experience, we need to understand, just like Matt was saying, that it is a dialogue and that, yes, you may have the same entry point in a couple different scenarios, or you may use the same quote unquote tools in a couple different places. However, the way you apply them, where you might go from there, how long you spend on it, the way you describe it, maybe how you might adapt, those all are going to be the nuances that help you individualize the experience. And so I know we're kind of in a space right now where we're trying to move away from this like progressionized teaching, because it's gotten a lot of people caught up in doing, I do this now and then this next and then this third, right? Which we know doesn't meet the individual where they need. However, like, it's okay to have some plans. It's all right to be like, hey, these things might work together. But the key to all of it is you have to pay attention to your student if they are achieving the activity, if they're showing you signs of understanding, right? And so to truly teach masterfully, it doesn't mean that you're not doing some things you've done before, right? We all have, but it means that you might be adapting them or choosing the timing or choosing how you describe them for that unique individual. So I think it's an important thing to remember. Like, I use a lot of the same things, and then every once in a while I'll do something I've never done before, because in that moment I was like, I think this might work, let's try it, right? So I think that's the key takeaway, is it's okay to have some regular things that you fall back on, that you're used to, that you feel comfortable with. Then it's really important to make sure you're paying attention to your students.
Now, I'd like to add two things to this, because like Zoe said, first time obviously comes to mind, but it's a very structured lesson. But if the four of us were to teach that lesson and someone came in and experienced that lesson with each of us, I think they would each have a very different experience in that first time lesson. We may be following the same thing, but we're also putting our own creativity into it. And I really look at words and what we're saying in a lesson a lot like movement, because we need to speak in an efficient manner with effective words.
As I'm reflecting a lot as we're talking. It's so fun to just nerd out a little bit about all this. So, Josh, that must be why you picked us.
Yes.
You know, I'm thinking about the comments. Zoe, you really brought attention to me that there's a pendulum we're swinging around on, and I remember back to when I was a new instructor, and I was that person who just had to figure out the beginner progression, and it was so linear. It was like this, and then eventually I started learning that it didn't have to be so linear. I could insert my creativity in lots of ways and still have a very impactful, if not a better, learning experience for my students. And then, of course, that pendulum swung so far and it got so creative that it was probably pretty loose. And I thought I was probably doing an amazing job because I was just thinking so far outside the box. And so, like, your point about it's okay, I think really hits home for me, of realizing that there's a balance and bringing it back to some things that really do help build skills for people, and going to those things and then letting go of the steering wheel a little bit after that is a better approach than just full on creativity.
And between all those comments and these ideas, creativity, to your point, Matt, we can go in and be creative with a plan. with an idea of what the end goal might be, what our student believes is good skiing. That's kind of the goal that we're working towards, or good riding. Then if we're at the opposite side of the spectrum, the pendulum swings so far that all of a sudden we go into our lesson free form. Next thing you know, we lose the structure, we lose the opportunity to build towards some desired outcome. And, through this research, something that came to my mind based on all this is thinking of our first year instructors. Maybe they come to the snow, and we're going to think of them as artists. They come to the snow with 3 crayons, a red, a blue, and a yellow. And they can use those colors however they want. All of a sudden, they're using those primary colors. They start to understand that the colors mix. They can do different things. And they're getting to a similar results at the end, but in different patterns. As they improve, they gain different colored crayons, and their crayon box, their toolbox is the analogy. Their crayon box is continuing to become more colorful, and then they can create these more beautiful, more elaborate pictures with their simple steps because they've been doing it more often. And it's been really fun to think of it in that way, for me at least, because that really is what we're doing. We're creating these experiences. No single experience is going to be the same. You can even bring it even more simply. We could have all 4 of us make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And I guarantee you the way that we do it and the jelly that we use, the peanut butter we use, is probably going to be slightly different, but we all made a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So that's what's come to my mind based on this research and, of course, our conversation right now.
Yeah, I think that's a great analogy for sure. Right? Like, everybody has a little bit different goals. They're coming into the experience with something a little different, but at the end of the day, the tool can only do so many things on the snow, right? The primary colors are still there. And so, I think that's fantastic, right? Meeting people where they're at and making sure you continue to grow your understanding. So I'm going to beat the drum, but continue to grow your understanding of the sport so that you can continue to kind of coach those nuances and be able to help people achieve their outcomes even better.
Absolutely. And so you mentioned building understanding, like technical proficiency, going towards expertise, mastery of the sport. An inspirational instructor has character that is authentic, a clear sign of dedication to the sport, to their students. And Matt, you got to talk quite a bit about authenticity on the stage at National Academy. We got to talk about it, of course, through the research. But for you, whether it's being that committed professional or being that just authentic human, I mean, how do you go about making sure that you are going into your lessons with a character that accurately portrays who you are and sets it up so that your student has a positive professional experience?
It's funny, as you ask that question, I am paranoid that I'm going to answer it differently than when we talked about it on stage. But I think that also speaks and answers the question in itself, that I know that I'm growing and changing and evolving all the time, and recognizing that, and then giving myself the space to be learning as I'm acting in my professional manner, or being in my role in the career, and that I think is really my guiding light, I guess, it's basically giving myself some grace, and then potentially, if the dynamic is right, sharing that struggle that I might have with the people I'm around, to show that humility to them, that I'm wanting to do the best I can for them. And that can be really tricky, and to sort of bring them in on that journey. And I think that can bring some buy-in, and it can build trust, and it really helps to create something so I'm going to use the word authentic again. I wanted to use a different word, but I'm just going to use the word in the definitions. It makes the authenticity so authentic. I just got to leave that there, I think.
That's good. Yeah, authenticity, man. It's a unique thing, especially, well, right, we draw on our experiences. And so as somebody, and Matt works on the people skills task force with me, we both have gone through this space. Especially people skills are a big part of what we're talking about, right? Being able to connect with folks, build trust, build relationships. Like it's a third of what we need to create this learning connection with our students, right? And so it's interesting because I think there's probably some misconception about authenticity as well, right? And I think you can be authentic and still adapt your behaviors to meet the student for what they need, right? And I think that's been, if we talk about learning and growing and changing, right, a journey that a lot of us are on of, okay, like I'm me, right? And there may be some behaviors that I potentially lean on, right? The main things that I like to do. However, right, I'll use myself as an example. I am not quiet. I'm shocked, I'm sure. And so I'm a pretty loud personality, right? I come into a space and oftentimes take up a lot of space, whether that's volume wise or just energy wise or whatever, right? And that's okay. And that's me and all that sort of stuff. However, some of the most special moments I've had with students is when I've adapted some of those behaviors and I'm still 100% me and still sharing my vision and still meeting them where they're at, but potentially doing it in a slightly different delivery than I would have usually. And I actually find even more connection. And then I find that they can almost learn more of me and we get to a better end goal, right? And so I think a lot of people, maybe I've heard, right, that people are like, oh, well, how can I be authentic if I have to adjust my behaviors, right? I think the root of you is still you, right? Like you're still going to care for people a certain way. You're still going to want to coach a certain way. You're still going to ski a certain way, all of these pieces. But the tone of voice I show up with, or the words that I use, or, maybe the body language that I am creating during that encounter could be slightly different so that I can have some better connection, right? The tool that I use all the time is I tell my students, I'm going to pull back the curtain here, right? So I essentially I'm like, hey, this is what's going through my head. I especially do that in training scenarios because I think it's really helpful to be like, hey, so right now, I'm trying to decide if we're going to go do this, that, and the other. Or I might be like, hey, we're going to go do this. And let me tell you why, right? Let me pull back the curtain to my thought process. So I think there's a lot of tools in which we can, like Matt said, show a little bit of vulnerability and a little bit of our like inner thought process and ourselves. But I also think that adapting some of our behaviors to create that connection can build on the authenticity because it builds on the trust.
I just have to say that was amazing sentiment, Zoe. I just nodding my head so much for anyone who's just listening and doesn't see the video right now. I was like, yes. Oh man, yes. Like, I just think about how we have to start building a bridge with the student who's likely feeling nervous, self-conscious, out of their element, and showing genuine interest through adaptation, like you're saying, Zoe, is so essential to get to the place where where both the student and you can be more real about the feelings and experiences and decisions that you're going to be making in the next, block of time that you have together. Yeah, man, that hits home, Zoe. It hits home. Home run.
Beautiful, you too. And, with authenticity, some of the words that each of you use to go deeper into it, I heard empathy being described, vulnerability, right? And that vulnerability of sharing previous struggles, or maybe it's sharing the current struggle of what am I going to do next? But being wise with that. And having a reason of when to share it, why to share it. Are you sharing your struggle because you want input from your student? And that enhances that trust, the communication, it's the collaboration in your masterful teaching. Having that, moment of saying, I have a couple options in my mind. What sounds great to you? And that does get to this idea of character. And then someone mentioned, Zoe, you mentioned behaviors. And as we think about the blue ring around our learning connection, it's instructors, decisions, and behaviors. Without that ring, the way that we connect those three triangles of our skills, we actually don't connect them. Like, it's what we do that makes those three stay together with the student in the center. And our character, or how we act on this note, how we behave, largely influences how we demonstrate our technical skills. It's our people skills, really, that are giving us the ability to make these decisions. And then, of course, teaching, we want to get them to a successful, positive outcome. So there's a lot to it, plenty of time to continue to unpack character. And we just spent time on personal character. Haven't even gone into what does it mean to be a dedicated professional and be an ambassador to a sport. But I do want to get more towards the student-centered approach. Because again, with our learning connection, the student is in the middle. And through the research, even just through this conversation this evening, I hear meet the students where they are. What does that actually mean to each of you?
I felt Zoe described it when she said, I'm a certain way, but you adapt to what your student needs. And if I'm in your class and I'm timid and I'm maybe intimidated more by someone being loud, and you change, that doesn't mean that you're changing yourself. You're adapting to meet your students' needs. And I thought you really addressed that well.
Yeah, that's Matt. What are your thoughts on that? Meeting.
Oh my gosh, I'm trying to write them down right now before they slip through my mind.
I was gonna say I have a couple slipping through my head too.
Yeah. So
and it's a big one.
Yeah, I like where do you start here?
Meeting people where they're at. It's just said so much, and you really put some meaning behind it.
I think for me, the concept, if let's call it a concept, like meet them where they are, right? It sounds so simple to say, and the journey to achieve that is so difficult sometimes. And I think it's difficult because it's easy to lead yourself into thinking that you're doing it when you're not. And this is going to tie back into that like continual reassessment piece and some humility to be willing to say that to yourself, like, oops, nope, I'm missing the mark here. Because, we get excited about what we're doing, and it's so easy for someone who has a lot of energy and enthusiasm about what's happening to assert that onto the people you're around, say your student, and then you might be influencing them in such a way that the whatever their goals were has gotten lost. It's in the cloud somewhere. And so it's a tricky balance. And I think that and I think I'm thinking about myself, like my own interests can often cloud my ability to meet my student where they are. And additionally, my interests may come from, say, a parent who has told me what their kid should be doing. And so then I take that on, and then I might start trying to put that on the the kiddo that I'm out sliding on snow with. And now in two ways, now I've totally missed really learning what is going to be an amazing experience for the student. And so I if I just discard what the parent told me, and I know that that's now picking a battle. I'm now going to have to rationalize to mom and dad, or the parents. I'll just say the parents of that. Okay, actually, I went a different direction with your child, and we did this instead. So, and then you kind of have to sell them that was incredible for them. That really was the thing that's gonna build some interest from the kid to want to keep doing this with their parents. And that's really digging through the fog, trying to find that's really the direction you should go. And until you've done that a lot of times, it's hard to have confidence that taking a hard left in that direction is really going to bear some fruit.
Man, look at you bringing in the complexity of the parent partnership. Oh my gosh. Talk about a whole nother challenge, right? And I would say a lot of our membership teach kids. So like I'm sure there's a lot of folks nodding along here with you, Matt, of like there's a lot of layers to get to, sometimes even past what somebody says, to truly understand what they want and need, right? Like sometimes they even say, well, I want to do this. And you're like, you get halfway through the lesson, you're like, you don't really want to do that, do you? And so, but what's so interesting, right, is if I really like disseminating things down to like truly usable tools, right? And I think if we're talking about meeting the student where they're at, and it could be something as challenging as maybe some convoluted parent-child relationship where they want different things, yada, yada, or just something as simple as just like a person who showed up for a lesson. But you have to rely on your observation skills, your ability to gather information, right? Observation, gathering information, both, right? You may need to ask some questions, but you also need to observe a lot of body language, listen specifically to how people share information. And I think the better you get at that gathering information piece, the better you're going to, and if you have the understanding right behind it, like understand the sport a little bit, then you're going to be able to start to pair what you know with potentially what somebody's saying, right? And at the end of the day, I know this is not the easy answer, but experience means a lot, right? If we go out and have a lot of experience observing people and gathering information from them and teaching the sport, and the more we do it, right, the better we get at it. Not to say that somebody in their first year teaching isn't going to be great at it, but if you actually spend time thinking about how am I gathering information from these people, like Matt said, in the interest of understanding, right? Listening, gathering to understand, then once you gain as much information and experience that you need, the path will be clear, right? And you'll be like, oh, they said that one thing. I think I need to ask a question about that. Or, they did this little weird facial thing. I need to like figure out what they're feeling right now. Or, man, they did that drill really oddly. I must not have described it well enough, like let's go back and redo it, but it's all about observing, gathering information. That's how you meet people where they're at. You don't do it by assuming you're doing the right thing. Some humility, like Matt said.
I think those points are perfect in that it really demonstrates when we're student-centered. It really highlights that we are teaching people how to ski, how to ride. we're teaching our student how to be a skier, how to be a rider. It's not just us teaching skiing and riding. That is that individualized piece. How are we getting to our student's goal? Where are they coming from? And then once we're with them, we're going on a journey with them. And they might take some detours. We might have to join them on that detour and bring them back to some path towards an outcome. And it's, we've talked about it a couple of times already, but it's not just initially meeting them where they're at. It's continuously meeting them where they're at, or if you've lost them, don't bring them back to you, go to them. And that's been some of the things that have really stood out with this work with inspirational instructors. The last bit of student-centered approach that really stands out is this idea of building social bonds, not just between student and instructor, but also the social bond in terms of like bringing our students, our skiers or riders into the snow sports community, into the culture. How can we do that better?
Well, I'm going to try to start with a simple message. So here I am again, trying to say a thing with less words, and I'm going to have to wing it. Okay. The words didn't flow. Here it is. When you meet somebody, address them as a skier or as a snowboarder. Give them the title that they didn't think they needed right from the get-go. You're snowboarding, you're a snowboarder. Like that's being a part of the community, and it's an easy place to start. Hey, snowboarder, I'm excited to meet you. What's your name? So easy and relatable to all ages.
You just changed everyone's introduction.
Love it.
Mic drop.
Oh man, the community is what's so interesting about the snow sports community is it has a bunch of different facets, which I really love because people can find their space within it. And at the end of the day, we all consider ourselves as ambassadors for the mountain, right? I think, Matt, certainly the words, great. I think also just like the underlying feeling behind it, right, is not us and them, right? It's you're here now, you're part of it. And I think that goes even a little bit deeper, that it's important for us as leaders and teachers to have so much respect for our students. I think there's something to be said about that 47-year-old who's trying skiing for the first time. That's a really admirable thing to do, right? It's a really admirable thing to do. Like, I have a lot of respect for that person. And then there's, the 3-year-old who's on some little Riglet board. Like, oh my gosh, this child has so many opportunities moving forward and could be whatever they want. Like, how cool that they're here in this space, right? And so I just think it's really important for us. The easiest way to bring somebody into a community is to make sure that they feel like they belong. And we are not going to display behaviors that help people feel like they belong if we don't appreciate the fact that they're there. And so I would say on the baseline, right, we're going to bring people into community that we want to be there. And I think as teachers, leadership, ambassadors, whatever you want to call yourself, I think it's really important to continually remind yourself, hey, I'm so glad these people are here, right? I'm so glad they're wanting to learn. How awesome is it that they came here to do that, right? Whether they're taking a lesson or not, that's the whole community, right? I think it's really easy on an epic powder day to be like, oh my gosh, where did all these people come from? What are they doing? But then you just got to stop and be like, man, it's kind of cool that all these people are outside on a snowy day and not inside watching TV. Like, that's pretty cool that we all care about it that much, and that people are that gung-ho about skiing or riding powder that they're like trying to get to the front of the line. Like, that's pretty cool. So anyways, I just think like it's important that we just remember, if we really love this sport and community, then it's important that we care that other people are invested in it as well.
Yeah,
I
think it's a beautiful flip of, you know, the common outlook, potentially common outlook of people coming down the mountain. Maybe it's crowded, or those that are trying to get the powder day. But we as instructors, we as professionals out there teaching the sport, if we can show up on the snow in uniform, out of uniform, and be grateful for those that are also out there, like, that's what keeps the community together. I think you say it really well. It's like, be thankful for the student that shows up, be thankful for the student that shows up and maybe just continues to ski and ride on their own. Like, all of a sudden the community grows, supportive. And that is in part because we get to invite them. And that's a big piece. So is there anything, I want to open it up to the 5 elements that we've just covered. Is there any last bit that either of you want to touch upon, or George, if you have questions?
No, just want to hear a little bit of wrap up from each of you.
Just been biting my lip over here. Yeah, as you guys are talking about the inclusivity, right? The recognizing people for the significance of wanting to participate in something that you love, and that they're there to share that with you. And that I wanted to speak to that extends from the actual sliding on snow. That it also means sharing what might be happening in the après. Like, the community is part of that culture component as well, and to welcome them or talk to them about the restaurant to go to, or some other evening activity outside, some snowshoeing, ice skating, whatever the thing is, that those are also approaches that as mountain ambassadors we can advocate for and help bring people in. And I think it's good to just recognize that it's an all the time thing. There's this cliche as a national team member, you're always on. You know, you have this jacket on, there's this patch on your sleeve, it says this stuff. Even when you're not wearing that jacket, you're on. And it's there's so much to that, to just approach being at the mountain with that attitude. Even if you're not a national team member, if you're a first year instructor and it's the first week you're working at the mountain, taking on that attitude is going to go far. And it may even turn into repeat lessons and people that really enjoy being around you. And you're going to start building clientele right away, because you're there to be a part of their community and you want them to be a part of yours. And that, I think, has more value than we may know at this time. And I had this other little side note about how excited I am for mountains that are finding ways to get people out of the base area up on the mountain somehow. Like, I'm gonna just toot the horn of Big Sky a little bit. We got this cool new gondola going in, and it's going to bring our learning center up to Mid Mountain, and it's going to allow traffic all the way to the peak without skis or a snowboard. And how cool is it that anyone can experience the views of Big Sky regardless of your skill? And because I think that's a big barrier that people run into when wanting to be a part of the community, and then just feeling like that they can't, right? That they're out terrained, or they just can't participate. They can't see something. And we've all had the privilege of riding a chairlift up and seeing an amazing view. But someone who's been stuck on some beginner terrain may have never seen that. And we want them to feel included. So finding ways to offer that to our guests, I think, is huge.
I love it. That's great. Man, I mean, there's a lot of points for sure, and they're all super valid. And I think the the thing that I could maybe leave with, and this has just made me reflect on a little bit, is we've talked about like the newer instructor, and then we've talked about like veteran or those who are even on the national team. And I think the biggest thing that I think about when I think about our community of snow pros, right, is um, how much we can all learn from each other. And I watch, Matt, I was reflecting on you talking about like the reason we love the sport in the community, and God, nobody loves skiing with their friends more than a new hire ski instructor. They take every opportunity to like, they get an afternoon off and they're all just quick, change your jacket, let's go take some laps, just like at the base of it, man, we all love to ski. And like you said, we want to bring people into it. And as folks who are meant to be teachers, leaders, ambassadors, all those pieces, the more we learn about the sport, right? There's that beating that drum again about the sport, the technical side of it, but then about the mountain, about the environment, about the space you're in, the more you're going to be able to open up that world for those that you're with, right? They want to know, hey, what's that peak over there, right? They want to know, hey, why is the snow a little sticky today? And they want to know how to slide on their tool a little better. So I think it's our privilege to be able to open up people's world into that space and show them how much it can provide, right? Like for us, there's a reason we do it. It provides a lot for us. And so we want to open that up to them. And by being able to share that information, whatever it might be, just invite them in. I love it.
Josh, quick wrap up.
I mean, one thing I'm going to say to wrap this up is Zoe, Matt, and truly anyone that's on the team, they are resources on understanding how to be inspirational in our instruction. So beyond listening to these podcasts, if you ever have the chance, ask them questions that you are truly curious about. They will give you their honest answer, as long as that's what I've experienced, and it's enhanced my own instruction as well. So I'm appreciative of everything that I've gained from current team members and past team members, and I know I can lean on these two especially to figure out how we can be more inspirational. So I know that's a big challenge for the two of you to continue on sharing and improving everyone else's instruction, but I truly trust the two of you to do so. Really appreciate the time that you spent this evening to share your own experiences and figure out how we can get this out to the membership. I look forward to more. I truly look forward to more. And George, thank you for having the three of us chat a long time about inspirational instruction.
Thank you.
Dr. Josh Pighetti and team members Matt Larson and Zoe Mavis. Thanks so much for joining us on First Chair from the PSIA-AASI Satellite Studios in Corvallis, Oregon. I'm George Thomas.